Page 13, 7 lines from the top of the page. I'd like to begin with a sentence from Book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 31, sentence 10. Vayitzav Moshe אותם לאמור. This is Moshe Rabbeinu before he about to departed from this world. So he commanded them, saying, Miketz sheva shanim, at the end of the 7 years, meaning this is the children of Israel, they're about to cross the Jordan River. Joshua is about to take the leadership. So here is Moshe Rabbeinu, just before his passing, he directed them. So he said, the end of the 7 years, at the time of the sabbatical year, meaning Shnat Sheva, the Shemitah, during the Sukkot festival, during the festival of Sukkot. So as we said, every word in the Torah is very important, very crucial to our understanding. Rashi said, Miketz sheva shanim, at the bashana rishona shel Shemitah, the first year of the sabbatical year, shehi השנה השמינית, that's actually the 8th year. So Rashi asked, ולמה קורא אותה שנת השמיטה? Why you call it the sabbatical year? שעדיין שביעית נוהגת בה בקציר של שביעית. It's still the law of the sabbatical year applies, as we said yesterday, היוצא למוצאי שביעית, which means they go to the next year. Meaning, when we are dealing with the sabbatical year, it can go both ways. It can be a planned, something that we prepare in advance before the sabbatical year. It's already have the regulation of the sabbatical year. And produce that somehow soon you see how extended more than sabbatical year that goes to the 8 years. Now, the subject we would like to discuss, first and foremost, it's called Midot Chazal. Our holy sages was not only brilliant, but they are very clear and exact when it's come to measurement. And therefore, soon you see that there are certain things that turn to a point of so clear and so exact and succinct that we followed, and many times it's turned to a point that you just follow without getting the full comprehension of what's involved. So here is the discussion. We have a produce that we harvest, we collected it on a festival of Sukkot, but the sages tells us, and that's the conclusion of our discussion yesterday, that anything that we collect on a festival of Sukkot, it's 100% made before Rosh Hashanah, meaning it's more than 15 days earlier. So the question is, why we call it sabbatical year? It's already 8 years. אמר לרבי ירמיה לרבי זירא, 7 lines from top of page 13. וקים להו לרבנן שליש לפחות משליש. You're going to tell me that the sages are so erudite that they are familiar with botany, with the procedure, with know to differentiate between something that brought 1/3, one produce that was reached out 1/3 of the growth, and produce that reached less than 1/3 of its growth? So it means that they know that those produce reach a point of being written at that time. It's basically the 8 years. It's and the Torah used the term Shemitah, sabbatical year. So we know that, especially in the modern day, that there is a concept that you expedite the procedure of growth. There are certain way that the expert can put in and make the process faster. But how they determine that it's 100%? So we have the rule that anything, any tvua, any growth that before Rosh Hashanah, if it's 1/3 before Rosh Hashanah, and now it's already the 8th year, you treat it as the sabbatical year. Even it's now 8 years. But anything that you harvest in Sukkot, and you know for sure that 1/3 before Rosh Hashanah, אמר לי, למה מן הלך לא תפיק נפשך לבר מהלכתה, כל מידות חכמים הוא? Come on, he said to him. Guess what? The rule is, and it's a very, in a sense, very strong statement. He said that whatever the sages said, they know what they're doing. In other words, they are so clear and so, in a sense, they knew exactly that you should not challenge that. An example to that is the statement in the tractate Bava Batra, page 23b. So there is a discussion about gozal. Gozal is a very small bird. And the question they ask over there is, how far kama yachol ledadeh? How far this little bird can walk by itself outside? So the discussion there, they said up to 50 cubit, 50 amah. So Rabbi Yomi challenged that, and he says, oh, what happened if one leg is within the 50 and one leg is out of the 50? So they said that they throw him out of Beit HaMidrash, because Rashi said that we not mefakpek be-shi'ur chachamim. We don't challenge what the sages said. They know exactly. So here, Rabbi Zera gives us several examples. ב-40 שאה הוא טובל. ב-40 שאה חסר קור טוב, אינו יכול לטבול בהם. So he said, a person immerse himself. So he go to mikveh, to ritual bath. So he has to be in a size of 40 se'ah. Se'ah is the measurement of water that they use for the mikveh. So if they have that measurement, he can use. Now, kotov is like very small. It's like a little bit, tiny bit less water. So how you're going to tell me that if it's that little missing, is already not befitting? So for sure the rabbi said that the measurement of an average person is the 3 cubits, 3 amot al ama. And the whole idea of 40 se'ah goes by the measurement of average person. Now, so Tosfot said that the whole here is the measurement of the average. Now, there is a discussion if it's really mean that the sages know in that level, or they just, whenever they are not 100% sure, they unanimously decided to go to a certain measurement, that will be the measurement and that's it. So it's a dispute between the view of Ritva and others. But the key here is that's what's set up and it's done. You can't challenge it. The rabbi said that this is the measurement of mikveh, 40 se'ah, period. Next example, כביצה, מטמא טומאת אוכלים, כביצה חסר שום, אינו מטמא טומאת אוכלים. So here we speak about the law of ritual impurity, and it's a machloket rishonim if his make something impure or something else became to his as impure, but here we talk about the size of the egg. So he said an egg bag, if its size of the egg bag, meaning someone touch a food and connected to other food, so he said if the egg bag less than tiny amount of the sesame, so it's not render ritual impurity. So now you ask yourself, come on, what do you mean sesame? It's such a small, tiny measurement. What do you mean by that? But that's the beauty of the sages, that even in that size, it makes a difference if it's render ritual impurity or not. Another, 3 על 3, מטמא מדרש, 3 על 3 חסר nima, eno metame tumat midras. Here they talk about the ritual impurity imparted by treating. So they said, and we discussed it many times in the past, so if you have a piece of cloth, if it's the measure by 3 and 3 handbreadth, it carry ritual impurity. But if it's just a little bit less, it's already not. So you see here an example of all kind of ritual impurity. You have a discharge of male, female, women at delivery, etc. So they have the treating, tum'at midras, which is a tum'ah chamura. It's a very serious ritual impurity. So that's applied to what they sitting, what they riding, what they sleeping. Even they don't touch it physically. So for example, if there's a cloth between the flesh of the person who has a discharge and the place that he sit, so that's called tum'at midras, that treating. So the measurement is 3 by 3 handbreadth, Rashi said. It's befitting to sit on. So Hadar Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah lav milta ida amri. I backed out. It's not what I challenge when the sages said to differentiate between 1/3 to a less. For sure, the sages know to differentiate between the two. The ba'u minei chavraya. This is fascinating. It's about the student in Beit HaMidrash. They have a discussion, and here is an example. Merav Kahana, Omer. Now we're counting the Omer every day. What is the Omer? Omer was the offering that brought from the Seorim. That's a special korban, special offering that the people brought at the second day of festival of Pesach. But the Omer has to be from Tvu'ah Chadasha, from the new produce that come in Eretz Israel that year. Meaning we have the prohibition that up to that time you cannot eat from the new one. Let's elaborate on that. It was a time of Joshua entered the land. It's Joshua, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 5. So when it was the month of Nisan, and they entered to Eretz Israel. Now, they entered to Eretz Israel and they have a problem. There is a 5 days, and they need an Omer. And the Omer come from the Seorim, from that. So, here is the problem, how they get it. Shikrivu Israel beknisatam, that the Jewish people had when they entered the land. How they are able to do it? Mehichan hikrivuhu, from where they brought the first Omer. How they are able to do it? Im tomar de'ayel biad nochri. So there are two different menachot, minchot sorim. One is called minchat sota, and one is called, the second one is called minchat Omer. So how they have this seorim, this offering of the Omer. Im tomar de'ayel biyad nochri. If you tell me that they have the non-Jews that live in Eretz Israel, so what happened is they take from them and they bring it. What do we mean by that? So let's see the pasuk. The pasuk said, "Daber al bnei Yisrael ve'amart aleim." Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, "Ki tavo el haaretz," when they enter to the land, "asher ani noten lachem," that I'm about to give you, "uktzartem et ktzira." So it means that you should collect the harvest. Vehavitem et omer, you should bring the omer, the offering. Reshit ktzirchem el hakohen, whatever you collected. So we derive from that this is tvu'ah sheruya liktzor, which means this is the harvest that you can make, and has to be by you, meaning by the Jewish people. Now the problem is you have just 5 days they enter the land, and now they need to bring the offering. How they do that? You're going to tell me they use the non-Jews that live there? the Torah requires ktsirchem, it should be yours. Amar Rachmana, the Torah said it clearly. Velo ktsir nochri. That's one of the mitzvot that luyot ba'aretz. That's one of the commandments that depend only when you are in Eretz Israel, and they do not have the sufficient time to have their own, and Torah obligated them to have their own independent offering. Mimai de akrivu, dilma lo akrivu. So they said, guess what? Let's have the assumption that do not have the independent. So they maybe they didn't brought the Omer that year, and that's it. Why? Because they did not have the one that was befitting, made independent by them. So the Gemara said, Lo salkadatach, you can't say it. Why? Because because they said, oh, I was right. It's in Joshua chapter 5. Vayochlu me'avur haaretz. They said that they eat me'avur, from the dagan, from the produce of the land, mimachorat Pesach, on the next day after Passover, which is the 16 days, Rashi said, of the month of Nisan, which is the day that bring the Omer offering, which is the morrow, the next day of the first day of Pesach. Mimachorat Pesach achul, only on the next day after Passover did they eat from the new grain. Me'ikara lo achul, but initially they did not eat from it. The akrivu omer, vehadar achli. They brought the omer offering on the 16th day of Nisan. That's the way they are required, and only afterward they ate the new one, because otherwise they cannot bring the new one. That's what the Tosfot said. So anyway, the Rabbi Akiva Iger have a comment here why you need to go to all this process. Anyway, Mechani Krivu, from where they brought, Amar Lei, Rav Kahana said, Kol shelo evi shlish beyad nochri, which means they can do one of the two. Either they have a kinyan, which is a regular process of transactions between two parties, or they have the kibush, milchama, meaning they make they occupy the land, and that way they can acquire it. So they said, V'dilma ayel velo kimlehu, and maybe the grain had in fact already reached 1/3 in its growth, but they could not discern because they do not have the expertise to know the difference. One is 1/3 and one is not. Ela, you have to say kimlu, achaname kimlu. You said that they are able to discern with a certainty. So here, for sure, the sages know clearly when is that happened before 1/3 before Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Akiva Iger challenged that. And he said, I'm just giving you the vignette, he said, Tamuli de endome zelaze. How do you compare the two? דלעיל שלא ראינו התבואה קודם ראש השנה אלא עתה שקוצרים אותה בסוכות. So he challenged all of that. But anyway, Rabbeinu Badiam Batanura, on Tractate Maasrot, he had two different avenues. What does exactly mean 1/3? But back to the Gemara. V'dilma lo ayel klal. Maybe you said that the Jewish people brought the Omer offering from grain that did not grow at all before they conquered the land, and distinction was evident to all. Aval heicha the ayel riv'a ben shlish lefachot mishlish lo kimlu. But when it's come to reach 1/4 of its growth, they really have no clue how to differentiate between 1/3 and less than 1/3. So the Gemara said, no, lo sal kadatach, you can't say it. Dechtiv, because they said there in chapter 4, ve'a'am alu min hayarden. The nation of Israel came out from the Jordan to Eretz Israel. And that happened בעשור לחודש, which is the 10th of the month of Nisan. ואיסר כדתך לא היה אל כלל, if you tell me you do not have any type, בחמישה יומי מקמליה. So you're going to tell me that in 5 days, from the 10th day of Nisan until 16 day, which is the time of bringing the Omer, all of them will be ready and befitting for offering? Because the Gemara in Menachot 66, if you remember, they said that it has to be soft and full. So they said it's only 5 days. They come 10th of Nisan, then the 15th, they have 5 days. Elamai, the ayel riv'a, or danka, which means they have the grain had reached 1/4 and 1/6. Akati b'chamisha yomi mikamalya. So it's that possible that only in 5 days they are ready. Ela, and that's a fascinating statement. Listen to this. Mai itlach lemeimar eretz viktiv ba. Achena me'eretz viktiv ba. Daniel said in chapter 11 that the land of Israel is called the Eretz Atzvi. Eretz Atzvi, it's like the land of a deer. Land of a deer is a using of euphemism. Is the idea that this is the land that all the miracles happen. And you see it to these very days. Maaseh Nisim, everything miracle. Take for example in the Beit HaMikdash. They said that Omdim Tzfufim, the abundance of the Jewish people standing in the temple courtyard, and they are all like sardines, you know, they standing in they squeeze by so many that come to visit the building of temple, which was not such a large building, and the Jewish people worldwide come there. And then umishtachavim revachim, when they're about to bow down, miracle happen. Everyone have a space. You can pray to God. No one hear what you say, right? So I don't know about coming back. If that turn back, I don't know. But the idea is miracles happen. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, we all know that many miracles happen. So therefore, why are you asking that question? It happens in 5 days. It's ready, and that's it. Anyway, Matkif la Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina challenged that, and he said, "Umi matzit amart dehai asif katziru." He said, "How can you say that this gathering mean harvesting? Maybe it's something else." Because if you look at the text, the active, because they said in a sentence we just read earlier in the Deuteronomy chapter 16, festival of Sukkot you shall make for yourself 7 days, be'ospecha, when you gathered, migornecha u'miikvecha, from your threshing floor and from your wine press. Ve'amar mar, Rabbi Yochanan said in Tractate Sukkah, page 12, Bifsoled, Goren, Veyekev, Vakatuv Medaber. The text speaks about the waste of threshing floor and wine press. So that's basically we use to make the schach, the roof of the sukkah. So that's the requirement. You do it for that purpose. So it means when you speak about gathering on the festival of Sukkot, it's not referring to harvesting, but it's about what? Gathering straw from threshing floor. So Amar Rabbi Zeira, Hamilta Havai Beyadan. That's the way we learn. Ve'ata, that which means that the what we have is 1/3. Ve'ata Rabbi Chanina ve'shada be'narga. So Rabbi Chanina came, and it's again using a euphemism, case an axe upon it, which means cutting it down. His objection totally nullified the proof, right? Knock him out, right? But it's Ela Menalan. So how do you know that is 1/3? Kidetanya, Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef Omer, the Torah said in Leviticus chapter 25, וציוויתי את ברכתי לכם, and I commanded my blessing to you, ועשות את התבואה לשלושת השנים. The Torah asked, you remember 2 weeks ago when we read Parashat Behar, so people ask, how I'll be able to survive? I'm going to give away. You have the 6 years, the 7 years, the 8 years. What's going to happen to me? So the God promised, and he said, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years. 3 years means the 6, the 7, the 8. 13b, אל תקראי לשלוש, אלא לשליש. Meaning, here you need to zoom in the Hebrew language. Do not read 4-3, but for 1/3. So it means that the year for doing the ma'asrot, the tithe, is determined by the date on which the produce reaches 1/3 of its growth. So al tikri, every time they use that term, meaning that you have to understand it, not by it's a kri and ktiv. It's several ways to understand the text. Here it's a different v'hami baile legufei. But this pasuk we need for the meaning of the verse itself, because it's a response. We said, what are we going to eat at the 7 years? כתיב קרא אחרינה וזרעתם את השנה השמינית ואכלתם מן התבואה ישן עד השנה התשיעית. The Torah said you should plant the 8 years and eat yet of all produce until the 9th year. So that the later verse teaches about the 3 years worth of produce, and the first verse is available to derive the halakha with regard to 1/3 growth. So it means that that's 1/3 the time to obligate with the tithe. Now, we go now the process that we have these different gidulim. The mechaber, the code in Siman Reishchet, in the code chapter 208, he tells us all this measurement. But let's first read the text. האורז והדוחן והפרגים והשומשומין שהשרישו. So there is a time to do tithe. It's called Zman Maaser, and it's called Gmar Pri, which means when the produce is ripened, is ready to sell. So when it's come to Yerakot, different vegetables, we go by Tar Lekita, the time that you are collecting it. When it's come to Dagan, Tirosh, Yitzhar, so you go Batar Gidulo, which means that this is the right at the time that it's growth. When it's come to Ilan, the trees, Batar Chanata. Soon you see the details. So this is a Mishnah in Tractate Shvi'i, chapter 2. And they said rice, millet, poppy, and the aim are two krut she'eshrishu lifnei Rosh Hashanah, before Rosh Hashanah. And you collected them after Rosh Hashanah, mit asrin li she'avar. You basically go by the outgoing year. So it means if it's take root ishrish before the first day of Tishrei, so you go by the previous year, which means that umutarin bashvi'it. So for example, if the past year was the second year of the sabbatical year, so they have the first and the second tithe, and if it was the third year, they have the first and the poor people tithe. Umutarin bashvi'it. So if the previous year was the 6th year, and it was before Rosh Hashanah, they do not have Isur Shvi'it, the prohibition of the 7 years. Ve'im lav, if it happens the Hashrasha was after Rosh Hashanah, Asurin bashvi'it, so then you cannot use them in a sabbatical year, and in a regular ordinary year, ומתעשרים לשנה הבאה. So they basically they are tight for the incoming year. So that's Rashi said that it's not just this one, it's any type of legumes. Amar Rabba, Amur Rabbanan, now we try to understand what is involved here. So Rabba said, the sages tells us, and that's what something we're going to learn in Tedvav Amud Bet 15b, Ilan Batar Chanata. When it's come to a tree, we follow the time of formation of its fruit. Tvu'ah Vezeitim Batar Shlish. When it's come to a grain and olives, you go by the 1/3 of their growth. Yarak Batar Lekita. Vegetables follow the time of their picking. Hane, those legumes, Keman Shavinu Rabbanan. So these rice, millet, poppy, sesame, how and which one the rabbis equated. You're going to tell me that they go Batar Hashrasha, because Rabbeinu Chanel said you cannot compare them to a tree, you cannot compare them to an olive, you cannot compare them to a grain or vegetables. Hadar Amar Rabba. So Rabba came back and he said, Mitoch she'asuyin prachin, since they are, these crop do not ripen all at once, they ripen little by little. So you collect those kitniyot. So if you go by tarlekita, so you can have a problem, because you can mix old and new, and then you don't know what. So you have to go batar hashrasha. Az le Rabbanan batar hashrasha. So Tosfot tells us, just give you the vignette. ותימה תנח מעשר דרבנן לשביעי דאורייתא הווי דינם בתר לכיתה כשאר ירח. איך אז דינם בתר השרשה לתיר בשביעית שהשרידו בשישית ושם השביעית בזמן הזה. So Tosfot basically said that what we study in Tractate Gittin, page 36-37. So over there they speaks about Prusbul, the takana, the decree that Hillel made for the sabbatical year. And the Rabbah conclusion there that it Bazman Hazeh in our days is Rabbanan. It's rabbinic, it's not the writer. אמר לאביי ויצבור גורנו לתוכו. So Abaye said, now I'm based in my book, גורע כלומר ברש"י. Rashi tells us, ויצבור גורנו לתוכו, והא בכך, אם ישן וחדש מעורבים, יצבור כל הגורן לתוכו, כלומר באמצעיתו. So Rashi, based on what we study in Menachot, page 30b, that it's the centerpiece, it's the middle. So basically you have the mixture in the goren, and you take the first and the second type. So for example, you have 30% new and the rest is old. So you take 1/10, and yachasit, if you compare it, you have this saying, ונמצא תורם מן החדש שבו על החדש שבו, ומיישן שבו על הישן שבו. So if you go this way, you turn the set aside truma or type from the new crop in the mixture of the new crop in it, and the old one with the old. מי לא תניא. רבי יוסף בן קיפר אמר משום רבי שמעון שזורי. So Paul המצרי, he speaks about the Egyptian, it's called pul, Egyptian pole. So it's a cowpea plant. So the issue with that one is sometimes we use it as a legume, as a kitniyot. Sometimes you use it for the leaf, for the alim, and then it's yerek, it's like vegetables. But here you have the hashrasha, so you need it for the zera, shezra'o lezera, that you planted for seed. מקצתו השריש לפני ראש השנה, ומקצתו השריש לאחר ראש השנה, שם before ראש השנה, שם after ראש השנה, אין תורמים ומאסרים מזה על זה. You cannot set aside a truma or tithe from this to that. So, לפי שאין תורמין ומעשרים, because you not set aside תרומה, לא מן החדש על הישן ולא מן הישן על החדש. You do not mix from the new crop with the old one and the old one. So כיצד הוא עושה? So it seems Rashi said is a tircha, it's an arduous effort for him. צובר גורנו לתוכו. He should pile the entire stock into the threshing floor. ונמצא תורם ומעשר מן החדש שבו על החדש שבו, מן הישן שבו על הישן שבו. So you basically use the new crop with the new crop and the old crop with the old crop. So Abaye said, this writer tells us a very good solution. And therefore, even for you, for Rabbah, will be good. So, you can do it either if it's a lach, if it's a wet, yes, but if it's dry not. So Tosfot asked a question, and just again, we don't have much time, but Tosfot said, how about the years 2, the 3rd year, the 6th, the 7 years? So he said, you know what, he take the second tithe and he give it to a poor people. That's one solution, Tosfot said. So he said the Hashrasha is the 6th year, the Lekita is the 7 years, and we go Bata Hashrasha. But you have to remember what Tosfot said here, that Bazman Hazeh nowadays, the sabbatical year, follow the Rebbe in Gittin, page 36, that all it's rabbinic. Amar le Rabbi Shimon Shizuri Ka'amar, Rabbi Shimon Shizuri Savar, Yesh Bila. V'Rabbanan Savrei En Bila. Rabbi Shimon Shizuri said that there is a mixing, that all the new can come together. And Rabbanan said that there is no. You not assume that the old and new become thoroughly and evenly mixed. So piling the entire stock and mixing it together and then setting aside Truma, it's not ensured that they will set aside in a proper way. So here we have halacha. אמר רבי יצחק בר נחמני אמר שמואל הלכה כרבי יוסי בן כיפר שאמר משום רבי שמעון שזורי you can take this פול המצרי and do tightening at part before Rosh Hashanah, at part after. מה התקיף לרבי זרמי? אמר שמואל אחי ואמר שמואל said הכל לכל אין בילה חוץ מיין ושמן. He said that there is no mixing anything except for wine and oil. So if that's the case, how come he said that it's come to a pula mitzri, you can mix the old and new? ish tam titei הדאמר שמואל הכל לחכם אמר פרי, which Rav Zera forget what Shmuel said, that we go full ripen all products. So what we understand that those seeds, the pola mitzri, may be tied together. What are the plant which they grow took root before the Rosh Hashanah, and it's not, but follow what Rabbi Shimon Shizuri said. It's because all of the beans reach full ripening at the same time, and what we understand that as a result they're all considered produce of the incoming year. צריכה, page 14. די השמילה לך כרבי שמעון שזורי אברינה משום דקסבר יש בילה. כמה שמלה לכל אין בילה. So we thought that he thought that it's not. So he said that no mixing for anything except wine, oil and other liquid. ויש מילה לכל אין בילה אבמינה כרבנן סביר עלי כמה שמלה לך כרבי שמעון בן שזורי. ויש מילה נתרת if we know both of them אבמינה קשה לשמואל על שמואל יב contradiction between one שמואל the other. So the כמה שמלה לכל לך גמר פרי. We go by all full written of the produce, and for that reason the halacha follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Shizuri. Vehi shminan akol lechachar pri avamina afilu tvoa v'gizatim nami. I thought even the full ripening of the grain and produce, and we go by the ripening of the produce avamina afilu tvoa v'gizatim nami, even the grain and olives. So therefore, כמה שמונה לך כרבי שמעון שזורי במאן דפליג. ולהלכה יפלו רבי שמעון שזורי with regard to his dispute, so with regard to the beans. וליש מינן הנה תרתי. So let's learn the two statements. The halacha is according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Shizuri in all cases the tithe follow the full ripening. לכל אין בילה, למה לי? כמה שמונה, ליין ושם יש בילה. We'll come to conclusion which we'll explain tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, that the wine and the oil the yesh bila, that mixing for both wine oil and other liquid, there is no mixing for solids. But again, tomorrow Mitzvah Hashem will explain it at length. Shulchan Aruch Yoredea 271. The Shi'ur Mikveh, the measure of the Mikveh. A ritual bath that is used for purification must contain at least 40 se'ah of water. If it lacks even a tiny amount, so ducking immersion, it's not valid. We talk about orez, the rice, meal, poppy, and sesame in the sabbatical year. That's the Rambam, Ilchot Shemitah v'Yovel, chapter 14. So he said the status of rice, meal, poppy, and sesame, and the cowpeas, pola mitzri, that were planted for the seeds, is dependent upon the time of the full ripening of the produce. If they ripen only before the sabbatical year began, they are permitted to do a sabbatical year. But if it's ripened fully during the sabbatical year, then they are prohibited due to the decree against aftergrowth. It's called sfichim. The Rambam ruled follow Shmuel, and for sure there is others like the Radvaz and others that challenge them. We talk about ilan, a tree. So the Rambam said, Ilchot Bikurim, chapter 2, and Shulchan Aruch Yordea 294, that both Orla and Tide, the year of fruits, are calculated based on the time of the formation of the fruits. So the new year of fruits is the Tu B'Shvat. Now, Yerek, vegetables, we follow the time of the picking. The tight year of vegetables, it depends upon the time they are picked. If they are picked before Hashanah, they are tied as produce of the previous year. And if they are picked afterward, they are tied produce an incoming year. And that's the Rambam, Ilchot Trumot, chapter 5.
Boyachem leshuloim malachai yeshuloim malachai